All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Sunday, September 1st, 2019, and our eyes remain fixed on a catastrophically powerful Category 5 Hurricane Dorian producing 185-mile-an-hour winds along with colossal surge, rain, and waves through the Northern Bahamas. And this is truly a historically powerful storm we're watching this evening, guys. I know it sounds like hyperbole or exaggeration, but this absolutely is one of the most powerful hurricanes to landfall all time in the Atlantic basin. So, truly a historical storm you're watching tonight. And I'm kind of getting sick of that term myself. Seen way too much history over the last few years, but this is the reality of it. So, Dorian's obviously the first thoughts are for the Bahamas. Will be a devastating, catastrophic hurricane for these two islands, Great Abaco and Grand Bahama. It moved over Great Abaco earlier today, kind of took a stair-stepping motion like this, and now it is setting its sights on Grand Bahama. That western eye wall just now coming ashore on the eastern tip of the island. There is likely 160 to 180 mile an hour winds occurring in this little narrow band right now. So horrible, horrible conditions. And Dorian is almost completely stalled right now, or it's slowing down significantly. And not a good night for them at all. So, anyway, latest on Hurricane Dorian from the National Hurricane Center at 5 p.m. Maximum sustained winds again 185 miles an hour, and that movement is now just 5 miles an hour to the west. And I can tell you over the last few hours, it may not even be that fast. The 3 day forecast cone, I took off the 4 and 5 day because until this thing turns, it's pointless to try to speculate about that track. It's so much of a butterfly effect. There's no point to worry about it yet, guys. Let's get this thing through Florida, get it turned, and then we'll see what it looks like for the Carolinas. You guys need to be on alert tonight for a hurricane passing very close to you. But until then, we're not going to really know anymore. But looking at the latest from the Hurricane Center, all the watches and warnings are up right now. Let's talk about them real quick. We do have a hurricane warning in effect for, of course, the northwestern Bahamas, but also the Jupiter Inlet to Volusia Brevard County line. That's going to be those warnings there in pink or purple. And then tropical storm warnings are in effect for North Deerfield Beach to Jupiter Inlet. And then also the hurricane watches and tropical storm watches extend on either side of that, and the oranges and the yellows. So you can see a lot of people are under a lot of watches and warnings tonight, and these will spread further north as we look out going into tonight. I bet at 11 p.m. we'll probably see these at least tropical storm watches will go up from most of northeast Florida, and eventually those could become hurricane warnings if this system does track further west. I would say, as far as the other big thing tonight, is the storm could still come further west. Parts of Florida are still directly in the forecast cone, and we are not out of the woods. So, I know a lot of people still think that this thing's going to be fine, it's going to turn and miss, and it's not going to be a big deal, but this thing could surprise a lot of people, especially in central Florida and possibly even in North Florida, if we see more of this westerly turn. So please don't fall in love with those tracks, and please don't sleep on the storm. You do at your own peril. Looking at some other things tonight with the satellite presentation. Again, like I mentioned, we're micromanaging little details tonight, guys. We're watching high pressure over here, high pressure to Dorian's north. Remember last night I showed you how these clouds were kind of bowed up and around the storm? Well, we kind of have more of two distinct high pressure cells. The more northerly cell is more like this now, and then we do have the southerly cell, which is kind of set off right here. The more east westerly cell is more over here. What it kind of comes down to is these two high pressures are still competing for the steering currents of Dorian, and now that they've become a little more opposed to each other, we see Dorian is beginning to take that stalling motion. So watching exactly the track and exactly the stall of the storm is a big deal. Watching for any jumps like we saw earlier, that stair step motion around the island is a big deal. And we're also watching things in the upper level. So let's look at a water vapor satellite that tells us a little bit more about what we're watching this evening. So if we analyze this, we can see a high pressure cell in the upper levels off to the west of Florida. And one first thing we want to look for is these bands of Dorian. Where do they stop? And you can kind of see as this one band here advances, it begins to slow down as it runs into this kind of flow here across Florida. You can see the high pressure is just about to start blocking it. How far and where this begins to set up and where this compression begins to take place of Dorian's bands will tell you when the storm's ready to slow down. But it appears right now that this hasn't quite happened yet. So we need this high to hurry up and block Dorian and wall it off. You can see about where the brakes are going to be put on, but this is a lot of freight train to slow down, and we got to watch and see where that happens. In the upper levels, we also have to watch here as this canopy does expand. How much does this canopy expand? We see the expansion is very good due north of the storm, but these other clouds are only moving out so far. This tells you the extent of the weakness to Dorian's north, and the more weak the storm or more weak the pressure is up here, the more Dorian will want to be coaxed towards that. So watching how all these little parameters develop are a big deal. I can show you this also via the upper level winds here from the Storm Prediction Center's analysis. This is upper level flow way up in the atmosphere. You see in the upper levels, high pressure over the four corners. We also have this small high pressure cell, though. Really, the big player is this one right here, and the high pressure it's centered offshore, but the general flow of high pressure is right here. You kind of have a cell like this, and you have the cell kind of like this. So again, we watch those clouds that we're pushing in towards Florida, and where exactly do these things sort of meet, and also how much more can this high pressure influence Dorian to continue to move west. Also in the upper levels, we do have this trough right here. This trough is a trough of low pressure that's trying to come in, and it's trying to break down the high pressure to its east. I'm saying pressure. Technically, I should be saying heights, but just for the sake of argument, we'll just say low pressure versus high pressure. In this case, this trough wants to come in and break the high pressure down to Dorian's north, which was going to allow this turn. We do see this coming. We see this trough, and it looks at least decently healthy, which is a good sign. But we also have a little problem. We have a little trough down here in the Gulf that's trying to erode this high pressure over Florida. If this happens first and this high retreats first, Dorian will be allowed to come further west before it is picked up to turn, and that's what puts those coastal skirt areas in place. That's what also puts those still direct landfalls. So this high pressure breaking first is kind of the west side of the hurricane center's cone that still encompasses parts of Florida for that center of the storm to still come very close or almost directly over. On the other side of the cone is this trough really just goes full crazy and breaks this high down real soon, and then that opens up a quicker stall and a more direct turn offshore with a bigger weakness to Dorian's north, which then kind of gives us that more easterly side of the cone, and then the solutions in between and the hurricane center's line are kind of the thinking of these things happen at about the rate we would expect. So what does all that mean? That means that tiny little details are driving the forecast this evening, and watching these little tiny things, like watching the last few frames here, it looks like Dorian maybe wobbled further south. He could wobble back up under the island before it turns north. Earlier today, it hit this island and wobbled up. It could just as easily wobble back down. We'll see if this kind of jump and then kind of jumps back. Those little motions, watching little clues in the atmosphere like this, and then watching our charts to see how well everything's breaking down is going to tell us the story of the track. And guys, it's just going to take most of the night to figure out where exactly this happens. I think by tomorrow afternoon, late tomorrow morning, we can really start to tighten up the forecast. And the forecast, like I know what you're looking, I know what everybody's looking for. They're looking for something like this. They want to see these graphics and go, okay, what can I exactly expect? This is, for example, the Jacksonville office's weather brief. So for the Northeast Florida region, tropical storm wind speed probabilities, hurricane force wind speed probabilities, and whatnot. But I stress that the difference in Dorian stalling by a few hours or wobbling by a few miles could put this track like this, or like this. And the differences in this track and this track and this track are all crazy different. All these values can just as easily shift this direction, and all these yellows can move over here, all the blues can move over here, and all these are replaced with reds, which are hurricane force winds. And just as easy, I can take them and shift them all back and put the blue on the beach, the yellow offshore, and then this would, not even be an issue. So it's really early. It's probably, I'm sorry, it's not really, it's a bit early to be trusting these impacts and these briefs just yet. They're the best guess, and if nothing major changes, this is what you'll expect. So, for example, the hurricane potential gusts, you're looking at hurricane conditions possible right along the Jacksonville coast or the same, area south of Jacksonville, and then tropical storm force gusts through most of the area, and then those less or at or less than the high end tropical storm gusts in that blue and then gray. So yeah, there's a lot of issues and a lot of things there as far as that goes. Let's talk about the timing again real quick. So right now, this is the GFS model, and this one's probably about the closest in the middle of the Hurricane Center's track. It's maybe just a hair to the left of it, which is what I would be leaning towards this evening until I start seeing some better clues in the satellite presentation. None of our clues right now are telling us that I'm bona fide sold on the east side of the track. I'm still sold on some ideas that could take me west of the hurricane forecast or the official track, but I think the official track is close to what we're going to see. But these little evolutions can sometimes change, and if they do, well, you know how that goes. We can have a change in a hurry. So everyone in the Florida Peninsula should be preparing for a hurricane along the coast this evening from South Central Florida all the way up to Jacksonville. Should be preparing for a hurricane and then hoping you get less, and you know might very well do so, but we'll see about that. But that's kind of the latest I got for you guys this evening. You know, we can look at this again on the windy graph. I forgot to mention this. We can talk you through the timing. So right now, this is late tonight. We'll go into midnight Monday where the storm really hasn't moved. By lunchtime on Monday, we do see Dorian beginning to lift out. But again, where exactly does Dorian lift? Because this model kind of had it back here and then had it lift this way. But what if it's right here when this lift occurs and the storm suddenly 40 miles closer to Port St. Lucie, and then it's 40 miles closer to the whole coast. That's what I'm talking about. So we see this lift occur here. By midnight on Monday, going into Tuesday morning, we see the storm has kind of gotten away from the Bahamas and has made a pretty solid turn. We see by 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the storm is still sort of trying to get going again. And then by 11 p.m. on Tuesday, we see the storm has now begun to accelerate. And now we have it very close to right at the central Florida mark. And then by 8 a.m. Wednesday, the worst of those conditions will be occurring on the Jacksonville and Palm Coast coastlines, and then by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the storm begins to move away. So the timing really for Florida begins to go downhill as early as tomorrow morning, as far as those tropical storm winds could already be kind of coming on shore right here. But really, the conditions begin to get bad for South Florida, South Central Florida by tomorrow afternoon. And then they continue to be bad until Tuesday morning. But then by Tuesday afternoon, more Central Florida gets in on the mix. And by Wednesday morning, North Florida gets in on the mix. So it's going to be a long time, guys. We're talking about a 2 to 3 day, really a 3 day marathon starting Monday afternoon and running through Wednesday night, where we're going to have these sort of adverse conditions, especially at the coast. And this micromanage of moving the storm here or moving it here can be massive changes in the forecast. So, anyway, that's what I got for you guys this evening. Hope you guys learned something. Hope you got something out of it. If you got any questions, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.